You will be remembered, not for how loud you were in their life, but for how silently you disappeared and still echoed in their mind. Why do they keep thinking about you at night? Not in the daylight when everything's moving, not when they're busy pretending they're fine, surrounded by people and endless distractions, but in the quiet, when the lights go out, when the performance ends, when the world finally shuts up. That's when you show up. Not because you tried to, but because you became unforgettable without trying. And that kind of presence? It haunts in the most beautiful way. Hey folks, picture this. Imagine someone trying to forget the taste of water while standing in a desert. That's what your presence became to them. They told themselves they were fine, moved on, didn't need you. But now that the heat of real life is burning, the distractions are gone, and all they've got is their own mind echoing off the walls. It's you they remember. You weren't just a name in their contacts list. You were a feeling, a safe place, a mirror, a moment of peace in their chaos. You didn't force your way into their thoughts. You simply became the only thing that made sense when everything else stopped making noise. My friends, this world teaches people to value chaos, to chase sparks, to overlook calmness and mistake it for boredom. They thought loud meant love. They thought attention meant affection. They believed that the one who made the most noise cared the most. But you broke that lie. You didn't compete with the noise. You became the silence that made them realize how lost they really were. They didn't notice you when the music was loud, but now that it's gone, your silence is deafening. They thought they moved on, but they can't outrun a memory that wasn't made with words. It was made with presence. That's the kind of memory that sneaks up on them when the lights are off. That's the kind of energy they can't recreate, no matter who they're with now. Seneca once said, "Sometimes even to live is an act of courage." And I'll add to that, sometimes to walk away silently is the most courageous thing you'll ever do. You didn't beg to stay. You didn't throw a fit. You didn't write a long letter explaining your worth. You just left with dignity, with stillness, like a storm that passed without warning and left everything changed. And now they're up at night, not because they're confused, but because the silence you left behind is louder than any words you ever said. Let them wonder, let them overthink, let them replay everything, because your silence was not an absence, it was a statement, a message, a mirror. They see it now, they feel it now, not when the world claps, but when it's quiet. And here's the truth, folks. They don't miss the texts, they don't miss the conversations, they miss the version of themselves that existed when you were around. The calm they felt, the safety, the reflection, and that's the real reason they can't stop thinking about you at night. So stay strong, stay grounded, stay silent, because the ones who learn to master themselves in the storm, they're the ones who echo forever in the minds of those who took them for granted. Say it with me in the comments. Calm is unforgettable. Drop it below if you feel this, and make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because we're just getting started. Stay with me. Number 1, the night strips away illusion. At night, the mind becomes louder than the world, and that's when the truth finally speaks. They don't think about you while the sun is up. They don't feel the weight of your absence when they're surrounded by noise, by friends, by scrolling, by distractions they mistake for healing. But when everything gets still, when the lights go off and the only thing left is the sound of their own thoughts, that's when you walk back into their mind, not with a knock, not with a scream, but like a memory that never needed permission to return. Picture it, my friends. Imagine someone standing in front of a mirror all day long while the room is full of smoke. They think they see themselves clearly, but they don't. Only when the smoke clears, only when the fog lifts, do they realize what was really there the whole time. That's what night does. It clears the fog. It strips away the lies they told themselves. And now it's you they see standing there. And this is what confuses them. Why do I still think about them? They whisper into the dark. Why does their silence feel heavier than someone else's presence? It's because your presence wasn't just about being there, it was about how you were there, calm, controlled, whole. While others ran around trying to be noticed, you sat in your strength, and now you're unforgettable. They thought letting you go would feel like freedom. They thought silence would mean peace. But now they're starting to realize peace never came from the absence of someone. It came from the right presence. And you were it. Not because you tried, but because that's who you became. See, they spent their days convincing themselves they made the right decision, that you were too calm, too distant, not reactive enough, that you didn't care because you didn't beg, that you didn't love because you didn't chase. But now that they're lying in bed and there's nothing left to distract them, they're realizing what they really lost. And let me break this lie wide open, folks. The one who walks away quietly is not the one who cares less. They're the one who respects themselves more. That's the difference. You didn't disappear because you were weak. You disappeared because you were done explaining your worth to someone who refused to see it. And that's what keeps them up at night. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's what you did. You didn't try to force closure. You didn't chase clarity. You didn't start arguments at 2 a.m. just to be heard. You walked away with your soul intact. And now, ironically, that silence, that very same silence they once found easy to ignore, has become the loudest thing in their life. Why does this happen? Because we live in a world addicted to stimulation, to quick answers, to fast replacements. But you were never fast food. You were a slow-brewed presence, the kind of soul that lingers, that can't be replaced with noise, that can't be unfelt. And at night, when the lights go out and the temporary distractions fade, the soul always reaches back for what was real. And maybe right now, they're with someone else. Maybe someone louder, more fun, more dramatic. But even then, in the quiet spaces of their mind, it's you who returns. Because nothing loud stays long, but everything real finds a way back, even if it's just in thought. So I want to tell you this. If you're wondering why they keep thinking about you, it's because the night is honest. The night has no filters. And when all their performances end, when there's nothing left to impress, it's your presence, your grounded, calm, non-reactive energy that their soul remembers, and nothing else quite compares. Write this down in the comments if it speaks to you. Silence reveals what noise hides. Let the world know you're the kind of person whose absence weighs more than most people's presence. Show them, show yourself, and stay with me, because what's coming next will shift how you see yourself forever. Number 2, your absence is louder than their noise. The loudest thing in the room isn't always the one making sound. Sometimes it's what's missing. There's a strange kind of power in being gone, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually, mentally. When your energy exits the room and it takes the calm with it, they feel it. They pretend they don't. They post louder, laugh harder, party more, but it's not joy, it's noise, a distraction, an escape, because your absence isn't quiet, it's screaming. Imagine this, folks. Imagine walking into your favorite place, maybe a coffee shop, a room, a corner of the world where everything once felt right. But this time, something's missing. It's not obvious at first, but the light feels colder, the air feels thinner. Something's off. That's what you became. The difference they can't name. You didn't leave a mess behind, you took the peace with you. And now that it's gone, the silence it left behind is louder than anything they can fill it with. You see, we live in a time where people equate attention with affection. They think if someone's loud, they care. If someone's constantly texting, calling, arguing, then it must be love. But you didn't play that game. You were present without performing. You didn't chase. You chose peace. And now, your absence has become the biggest presence in their life. Let's break this lie right now, that the one who walks away quietly is forgettable. That's the lie the insecure ego tells to make the silence feel less threatening. But here's the truth, my friends. The one who leaves with peace leaves with power. You didn't storm out. You didn't make a scene. You didn't try to be heard. And that's exactly why they hear you now, more than ever. You were the grounding force, the calm in the chaos, the one who responded instead of reacted. And now, in a world full of people who scream just to feel seen, your silence stands out like a lighthouse in a storm. You didn't have to do much. Just your presence alone altered the atmosphere. And when that presence disappeared, they realized it wasn't the words that mattered. It was the energy behind them. They scroll now, looking for signs. They post, hoping you'll see it. They pretend to glow, hoping you'll dim a little. But you don't, because your power was never performative. You're not trying to prove you've moved on. You actually did. And this confuses them. Why didn't you chase? Why aren't you broken? Why does it seem like you're calmer now that they're gone? And the answer is simple. Because you were never dependent on their chaos for your clarity. You were whole when you met them, and now that you've walked away, that wholeness is still your foundation. Meanwhile, they're scrambling to find what you gave freely: peace, presence, truth. Folks, let me drop something that might sting in the best way. If your silence makes someone more curious than your words ever did, you were never the problem. They were never ready, and they feel that now, not in the daylight, not in front of their friends, but at night, when it's just them, the ceiling, and the emptiness that used to be filled by your calm. Marcus Aurelius said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." And you followed that. You didn't stay to perform. You didn't cling just to prove your worth. You walked, not in weakness, but in wisdom. And that walk, that exit without drama, is now living rent-free in their mind. Because they've tried to fill the space. They've laughed louder, flirted harder, stayed busy. But none of it works. Because nothing replaces a soul that anchored them. Nothing replaces someone who never needed to be the center of attention to be the center of gravity. So let this be a reminder, my friends. Your absence is not empty. It's full of memory, meaning, and unspoken impact. They can try to drown it out, but the truth is, your stillness is louder than their noise ever will be. Type this in the comments if you feel this in your soul. My silence speaks volumes. Say it proudly. Show yourself. Show them. And stay with me, because what's coming next will make you see your worth in a way you never did before. Number 3. You became their safe place, and then left it empty. They don't miss the person. They miss the peace they felt when that person was around. There's a difference between missing someone and missing what you felt when you were with them. And my friends, let's not get it twisted. They don't just miss you. They miss the version of themselves that felt safe around you. That version that could breathe deeper, that could laugh without a filter, that could cry without judgment. That's what you were, a safe place. And now that it's gone, nothing feels right anymore. Let me paint this for you. Imagine a storm hitting hard, wind howling, trees shaking, rain pouring like it wants to tear the world apart. But right in the center of all that chaos, there's a little cabin with a warm fire inside. No noise, just calm, just steady. That's what you were. While everything else in their life spun out of control, your energy was the eye of the storm. And now, that cabin is boarded up, lights off, gone, and all they're left with is the wind. They didn't appreciate it at the time. They thought calm meant cold. They confused your emotional control for emotional distance. They were addicted to highs and crashes, and your steady heart didn't match their need for drama. So they wandered, looked for excitement, confused adrenaline for love. And now they're surrounded by sparks that never turn into warmth. And suddenly, the fire you brought feels irreplaceable. People don't usually realize what real safety feels like until they lose it. And here's the lie they believed, that peace was boring, that emotional maturity meant you didn't care, that because you didn't argue, scream, or chase, you must have been disconnected. But let's break that lie today, once and for all. You didn't scream because you had nothing to prove. You didn't beg because you had nothing to fear. You didn't chase because you knew that what's meant for you will never require you to lose yourself. That's not distance. That's discipline. That's emotional strength. That's Stoic self-respect. And in a world full of chaos, people like you don't just stand out. You become unforgettable. Seneca once said, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a person perfected without trials." And you were that polished gem, not because life didn't hit you, but because you didn't let it crack you. You were the calm in someone else's storm. You listened when they couldn't speak. You stayed quiet when they tried to push you into emotional games. You didn't match their instability. You anchored it. And now they're lost at sea without a lighthouse. You see, safety isn't something loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come wrapped in grand gestures. It's felt in the quiet, in the way someone's energy lets your soul take off its armor. And that's what you gave, without even trying. You didn't demand their best. You made it safe for it to show up. And that kind of energy, that doesn't come around twice. Now they're realizing it, slowly, silently, in those late-night moments when everything feels a little off, and they don't know why. When they're surrounded by people but still feel alone, when they keep chasing new experiences, new faces, new places, but none of it feels like home. That's when the memory of your energy sneaks back in, not because you're haunting them, but because your peace became a standard, and everything else falls short. They didn't know what they had when they had it. Most people don't. Because real calm doesn't beg for recognition. It just exists, like gravity, like breath, until it's gone. So if you've ever doubted the impact you had, if you've ever wondered whether your calm presence even mattered, hear me now. It mattered more than you'll ever know. You were their reset button, their mirror, their shelter. And now that it's gone, the world feels louder, colder, less safe. Write this in the comments if this hit you. I was the peace they didn't recognize. Own it. Show them. Show yourself. Because what's coming next will help you understand just how rare your energy truly is. Stay with me. Number 4. You never tried to be remembered. That's why you are. The ones who try hardest to be remembered usually aren't. The ones who simply were, those are the ones we never forget. You didn't play a role. You didn't perform. You didn't post quotes hoping they'd notice. You didn't throw breadcrumbs to stay on their radar. You just lived, calmly, quietly, authentically, and somehow, without trying, you ended up being the only one they can't get out of their mind. Because real energy doesn't need volume. It doesn't beg to be remembered. It simply is. Imagine this, my friends, walking into a room where everyone's shouting to be seen, dressed loud, speaking louder, dancing to be noticed, and then there's one person standing in the back, still, collected, saying nothing, but everyone feels them. That's you. You didn't need the spotlight. You were the atmosphere. the one whose presence whispered louder than their performance ever could. That's why they remember you now. Not as noise, but as a presence that settled their storm. They didn't expect that to haunt them. They thought they were looking for spark, for excitement, for fireworks. But here's the twist. Fireworks don't last. They explode, make noise, grab attention, and then they vanish. You weren't a firework. You were a candle in a dark room, constant, calm, warm. And now that the room's gone dark again, they're reaching for that light. But it's not there anymore. Let's break a lie real quick. The lie that says you need to chase to be chosen. That if you just tried harder, proved yourself louder, you'd be valued. No, that's not how it works for people like you. Because your worth never needed to shout. You weren't forgettable because you were quiet. You were unforgettable because you were. Because you didn't need to convince them. Because you didn't try to be anything but real. And that kind of real, that stays with people, especially after they taste the fake. You see, in a world obsessed with impressions, you left an imprint. Not a performance, not a highlight reel, but a feeling. And feelings, real ones, they don't go away easily. They show up when the music stops, when the mask slips, when they're lying in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering why no one else makes them feel that safe anymore. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do." And you lived that. You didn't shift who you were to win someone over. You showed up as yourself, steady, clear, true. That's the kind of integrity most people don't even recognize until it's gone. And now they're sitting in rooms full of people who say all the right things but don't mean any of it, and they're craving the quiet confidence you brought, the honesty without effort. Here's what they're starting to realize now. You didn't walk away because you didn't care. You walked away because you refused to shrink yourself for someone who didn't see what was already rare. You weren't trying to be remembered, and that's exactly what made you impossible to forget. Because you didn't become a memory, you became a comparison. Every conversation now feels a little emptier. Every laugh feels slightly forced. Every new connection gets measured against something they didn't even know they were losing at the time. You, the standard, the stillness, the soul that didn't try to win, and somehow still did. They're learning this the hard way, and maybe they won't say it out loud. Maybe pride keeps their mouth shut. Maybe silence is the only language left between you two now, but don't be fooled. They feel it, in every quiet hour, in every moment that feels almost right, but not quite. Because your energy, it's the one they didn't know how to keep, but can't seem to forget. So here's your reminder, folks. You don't need to try to be remembered when your presence already made an impression. You don't need to become louder to be felt. You already are, and the proof is in the silence. The stillness. The fact that long after you walked away, you're still there, quietly echoing through their mind. If this one hit deep, let it be known. Type this in the comments. Real doesn't have to try. Say it for you. Say it for anyone who's ever doubted their quiet power. Show the world what lasting energy looks like, and stay with me, because what comes next will remind you why you were never the one who lost. Number 5. They thought stillness was boring. Now it's a luxury. People chase noise thinking it's excitement, then spend their nights longing for peace they once called boring. Let's call it like it is, folks. They didn't leave because you lacked value. They walked away because they couldn't recognize value when it wasn't wearing flashing lights. Your stillness, your calm, your emotional consistency. They thought it was ordinary, unexciting, predictable. But now, in a world that spins too fast and people that talk too loud, that very stillness they overlooked has become the thing they miss the most. You weren't the roller coaster. You were the steady ground. And at the time, that ground felt too still for someone addicted to emotional highs. They mistook your calm for apathy, your patience for lack of passion, and now they're out there riding the emotional theme park, laughing one moment, crashing the next, and suddenly your peaceful energy doesn't seem so boring anymore. It feels like a luxury they can't afford now. Imagine this. They were thirsty in the middle of a drought, but instead of drinking from the clear, steady stream you offered, they went chasing mirages. Glittering, exciting, but always out of reach. Now, after running through dry lands full of drama and disconnection, they're parched. And it's not the thrill they're longing for. It's the water. It's you, the one who didn't need to be flashy to be real. Let me break the lie wide open. Peace isn't boring. Stillness isn't weakness. Predictability isn't dull. It's safe. It's rare. It's real. The world has tricked people into believing that love must be chaos to feel alive. But that's not love. That's addiction. That's instability dressed up as passion. And you were the opposite of that. You were peace in a world addicted to adrenaline. Marcus Aurelius once said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." And your ambition was never to entertain. It was to be grounded, to be whole, to be someone who could offer peace without asking for applause. That's why you stood out, and that's why your absence still does. See, now they're comparing, whether they admit it or not. They're sitting across from someone who might be fun, spontaneous, wild, but their nervous system is screaming for relief. They don't feel safe. They don't feel seen. They feel overstimulated, and that overstimulation is making them look back, because the adrenaline rush they chased can't compete with the peace they lost. And that peace was you. You didn't raise your voice. You didn't get caught in games. You weren't unpredictable. You were steady. And for someone who thought chaos was the normal rhythm of love, that steadiness was scary. Too quiet, too easy. But now they understand. Easy doesn't mean empty. It means evolved. It means you weren't trying to survive your own storms while being their shelter. You had already mastered your internal world. And that level of emotional mastery, that's gold. They're not finding that again. Not easily. Because people like you, people who bring stability, silence, safety, you don't advertise it. You just are. And the ones who once called it boring, they end up the ones who can't sleep at night, not because of regret alone, but because they can't find that energy again. They didn't just lose a person, they lost a feeling, a sanctuary, a baseline of peace that made their life feel less chaotic without even realizing it. So if you ever doubted the power of your calm, if you ever wondered whether your lack of drama made you forgettable, I'm here to tell you, you're the one they can't stop comparing everyone else to. Not because you were perfect, but because you were peaceful, because when everything else felt like noise, you were the silence that made sense. And now, in the middle of their chaos, they crave that silence. Not the silence of distance, but the silence of security. The kind where nothing needed to be said because everything felt right. That kind of stillness, it's not boring, it's sacred. And you, my friend, were the keeper of it. If this hits home, I want you to write this in the comments. My peace was the prize. Let them see it. Let yourself feel it. And stay with me. Because next, we're going deeper into the mirror you became, and why that reflection is something they still can't look away from. Number 6. Your silence turned into a mirror. The silence you left behind didn't just echo, it reflected. They thought your silence was just an exit, a closing scene, an ending, but it wasn't. It was a mirror, a brutal, beautiful mirror that didn't speak, didn't judge, didn't attack, but reflected everything they didn't want to see. And now, every time they sit alone in the dark, thinking the thoughts they swore they buried, it's not your voice they hear, It's their own conscience, triggered by your absence. Because that's what silence does when it comes from someone who was real. It forces you to face yourself. See, folks, people expect noise when things end. Arguments, explanations, closure, that messy kind of fallout where both people throw words at each other like shields and swords. But you didn't give them that. You didn't play defense. You didn't need the last word. You gave them something more powerful: space. And in that space, they met a version of themselves they had been avoiding. Imagine being in a room where someone once stood, filled with warmth and stillness and safety, and now it's empty. But the echo of their energy still lingers. That's what your silence became, a quiet room filled with reflection, because without your presence to distract them from themselves, they started to see the truth, not just about you, about them. You were the calm, the clarity, the anchor. But most importantly, you were the reminder of who they could have been, how they could have grown, who they were when they were with you. You didn't just hold space, you elevated it, and now that space feels hollow without you. Not because they miss being with someone, but because they miss who they were when you were around. They didn't realize it then. In the moment, it felt like freedom, like relief, like release. But now they're discovering the reality of what was lost. Because your silence didn't fade, it amplified. Every time they meet someone new, that mirror shows up. Does this new person make me feel seen the way they did? Do I feel safe? Or am I just distracted again? And the scary part? The answer keeps coming back: no. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And you were brave enough to walk away, to let go without bitterness. That wasn't weakness, that was strength. And ironically, they took your strength for emotional distance. But now, in the quiet, they understand. You weren't distant. You were disciplined. You weren't ignoring them. You were just done explaining your value to someone who wasn't ready to receive it. And here's the hard truth, my friends. Your silence forced growth. Whether they admit it or not, whether they ever say thank you or not. You became the trigger for a higher standard, for reflection, for awareness, because you didn't just disappear, you left a question behind. Why couldn't I hold on to something that real? And questions like that, they echo. The kind of presence you had can't be replaced with company. It can't be drowned out by noise. It can't be numbed by attention. You became a standard, and not because you demanded it, because you embodied it. That's the kind of person who doesn't need to speak to be heard, who doesn't need to prove anything to be felt. And now your silence is doing the teaching. People think silence is passive, but in Stoicism, silence is power. It's the controlled flame, the storm with no thunder. It's what makes the world lean in to hear what you're not saying. And they're leaning now, listening, remembering, reflecting, because the silence you gave them, it wasn't just an end, it was an invitation to grow, to evolve, to face the self. So if you've ever wondered if they think about you, the answer is yes. But more than that, they think about themselves around you. The version they once were, the version they lost, and the version they still haven't been able to find since you left. Drop this in the comments if this hit deep. My silence was their reflection. Let them see the kind of person you are, not the loudest in the room, but the one who changed it by simply walking away. And stay with me, because what comes next, it'll show you exactly why being unreachable now is what makes you unforgettable forever. Number 7. You're no longer reachable, and that's what haunts them. They weren't afraid of losing you. They were afraid of realizing they can't reach you anymore. At first, your silence felt like a game to them, a bluff, a temporary pause they could break with a text, a memory, a little attention. They assumed you'd orbit back, like everyone else did, like they would have if the roles were reversed. But you didn't. You didn't text. You didn't react. You didn't peek back through the door. You vanished like a ghost that chose peace over performance, and now that's silence. It's not just confusing. It's terrifying, because what they thought was a pause has turned into a permanent distance, and that distance has become their obsession. You see, my friends, it's not just that you're gone, it's that you're unreachable, not just physically, energetically, spiritually. The cord was cut, and now they're left holding the loose end, realizing they never learned how to tie it to anything real. They didn't expect you to heal in silence. They didn't expect you to detach with grace. They didn't expect you to become someone who didn't need closure, revenge, or validation. And now that you've become unreachable, their thoughts won't let you go. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine someone lighting a candle every night in a dark room, believing that the match will always be there. They got used to the light. They forgot how dark it really was without it. And one night, without warning, the match is gone. And no matter how many times they strike the box, it doesn't spark. That's you. You were the light they thought would always come back on. And now that it doesn't, the darkness feels colder than ever. They're not haunted by what you said, because you didn't say anything. They're haunted by what you didn't say, by the words you never texted, the emotions you never performed, the closure you never begged for. You see, in silence, the mind plays tricks. It fills in the blanks, it creates stories, and now they're writing entire novels in their head about why you never came back. Was it someone else? Did you ever really care? Did they matter at all? Or did you just realize they never deserved the version of you they got? That's what eats at them. Not your words, but your calm disappearance. Because people expect anger. They expect drama. But when you walk away without burning the bridge, without looking back, without leaving a trail, you become a mystery. And there's nothing more haunting than a mystery with no ending. Marcus Aurelius said, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And you didn't try to win. You didn't try to make them jealous. You didn't throw your healing in their face. You simply moved on, quietly, powerfully. And that kind of departure, that's what turns reflection into obsession. They're checking. Don't let them fool you. They're watching your social media, scrolling through old photos, reading old messages, maybe even typing out texts and deleting them. They're looking for signs, a signal, a crack in your silence, but there's nothing, just your growth, your glow, your peace. And that kind of peace, it can't be faked, it can't be ignored, it demands to be felt. Here's the truth they're learning far too late. You don't have to slam the door to be done. Sometimes the softest exit leaves the deepest impact. And now, while they're surrounded by noise, you're the one they remember in the quiet. Because you were the standard they never learned how to value, and now that they can't reach you, they finally realize what they had access to and lost. So if you've ever felt like your silence wasn't noticed, believe me, it was. It still is. Every day they don't hear from you is another day they realize you're not coming back. And that realization, that's the loudest sound in their world right now. Write this in the comments if you feel this truth. They can't reach what's healed. Let them know you didn't just walk away. You elevated. You rose. You became someone who doesn't respond to chaos with chaos. And stay with me, because the next part, it'll show you how your ability to respond, not react, was the moment you shifted from memory to mystery. Number 8. You responded, not reacted. The strongest one in the room is never the one who shouts first. It's the one who stays quiet, watches, and chooses their response like a sword pulled only when necessary. Let's get something straight, my friends. Anyone can react. That's easy. That's impulse. That's survival mode. But you did something most people don't know how to do. You responded, and in a world full of knee-jerk emotions and overblown drama, your response, measured, calm, intentional, became unforgettable. They thought they could provoke you, that if they pushed hard enough, ignored long enough, twisted the truth deep enough, you'd crack, you'd lash out, you'd beg, you'd fight to prove your worth. But you didn't. You paused, you breathed, you watched, and then you made a decision, a stoic decision, not to fight, not to explain, but to walk away with your soul intact. That moment, my friends, that was the shift. The moment you separated yourself from the crowd, from every past relationship they ever had, from every chaotic connection that was built on who could scream louder, guilt harder, win arguments like battles and call it love. You didn't fight for the connection, you preserved your self-respect. That's what's echoing in their mind now, not your words, your restraint. Let me paint this for you. Imagine two people on a battlefield, one swinging wildly, exhausting themselves trying to look powerful, and the other, still, focused, sword still sheathed, not because they're afraid, but because they know real power doesn't need to flail. That's who you were. They thought your stillness meant indifference, but what it actually meant was mastery. Seneca once wrote, "A wise person does not give way to anger. They do not allow their temper to be roused. They remain calm, and this calmness is a sign of strength, not weakness." That was you. You didn't rise to their bait. You didn't match their chaos. You responded, and that's the part they didn't expect. Because people are used to reactions. They're not used to presence, especially when it doesn't come with emotional explosions. And now, that calm haunts them. Because when someone shows you what emotional leadership looks like, it sets a standard. They'll compare everyone else to it without even meaning to. They'll argue with someone new and think, why doesn't this feel safe? They'll explode and wonder, why can't they just breathe like you did? Because you didn't just stay calm, you created calm. And not for show, not to win, but because you were it. They remember the day they tested you. Oh, they remember it well, when they raised their voice and expected you to match it. When they pulled back emotionally, expecting you to chase. When they tried to stir the waters, but you just sat by the shore and let the waves crash without reacting. That wasn't silence out of fear. That was composure out of principle. And the best part, you weren't trying to be seen as strong. You just were. Your calm wasn't an act. It was your truth. And that truth now echoes louder than any reaction you could have had. They expected chaos. You gave them clarity. They expected conflict. You gave them closure. They expected a fight. You gave them a mirror. Because when someone can't trigger you, they have to face themselves. And that's what's happening now, in the late hours, when they think back, when they replay those moments, not of what you said, but how you didn't say anything unnecessary. That's the mark you left. That's the part they can't unsee, because you didn't need to scream to show strength. You just had to remain unmoved. So if you've ever questioned whether staying calm was the right move, let this be your confirmation. You didn't lose control. You chose clarity. And that's why you're still on their mind long after the storm has passed. Drop this in the comments if you know the power of restraint. Stillness is strength. Let them know your silence wasn't submission, it was sovereignty. And stay with me, because up next, we're about to explore how your energy didn't just create peace. It set a new standard they'll never find again. Number 9. Your energy was a standard, not a show. Real ones don't chase attention, they raise the bar, and when they leave, nothing feels enough again. You didn't perform, you didn't show up to impress, you didn't wear a mask or exaggerate who you were just to win someone's heart. You showed up in your truth, calm, clear, grounded. You didn't try to be a fantasy. They saw the real you. And now that you're gone, that realness is haunting them more than any perfect performance ever could. See, most people are chasing sparks, not foundations. They want butterflies without building peace. They confuse attention with affection, validation with value. And when they met you, they thought you were just another soul passing through. But you weren't noise, you were alignment, the kind that doesn't scream for recognition because it is the recognition. Let me put it this way, folks. You were like walking into a room that didn't need decoration. The vibe was already there. The energy was already balanced. It wasn't loud, but it was undeniable. You didn't try to take up space. Your presence made space. And now, no matter who enters that room next, something feels off. The energy doesn't feel the same, because the standard left the moment you did. And here's what's wild. They may not have seen it clearly when you were there. They may have even mistaken your consistency for predictability, your emotional stability for lack of excitement. But now they're seeing what you actually gave, and it's not attention, it's security, it's not control, it's respect. You didn't just hold space for them, you raised their standard for what a connection is supposed to feel like. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." And that's what you did. You were the thing people only talk about, the one who didn't say, "I'm different." You lived differently. You didn't lower your voice to match chaos. You didn't shrink your standards just to stay close. And now, the silence you left behind is louder than any promise they've heard since. Here's what most people don't realize until it's too late. Not all energy is equal. Most people drain you, confuse you, spark you up only to disappear. But you grounded them. You were the emotional gravity that made their world feel still for once. And now that gravity is gone, they're floating again, but not in a good way, in a lost way, in an "I wish I appreciated what I had" kind of way. And the worst part for them, they're not even sure they'll find it again, because people like you don't repeat. Your type doesn't come back around in circles. You move in straight lines, forward, focused, free. You were a standard, and you don't chase, you don't settle, you don't water yourself down for people who prefer noise over nourishment. So if they're thinking about you at night, which they are, it's not because you begged to stay in their memory. It's because you became the benchmark that no one else is measuring up to. And deep down, they know they had access to something real, and they didn't hold on to it. Let that be your power now, not in bitterness, not in pride, but in quiet truth. Because being remembered isn't about being loud, it's about being unmatched. It's about knowing your worth, living your values, and never needing to explain your silence, because your presence already did what words never could. So if this spoke to your soul, my friends, I want you to leave one final message down in the comments. I was the standard. Say it with confidence. Say it with peace. Because the truth is, you didn't lose anything. You were the one. And now they know it too. And if you felt this entire journey deep in your chest, hit that like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who forgot how powerful their presence is. Stay with me, because the next chapter, it's not about who remembers you. It's about who you're becoming.